thought those two grounds might be arguable, but only in relation to three of the charges, because they said only three of the charges related to journalism. And now, since the evidence from Professor Grimm, who used to be a federal judge, was presented, and Professor Grimm said actually the First Amendment would apply to all of them, it seems that they have now reversed their position. That would appear to be quite significant, right?
It's not clear to me from the earlier order of the court whether the court had made up its mind whether this challenge related just to three of the counts that were directly related to publication or related to all of the counts. We certainly believed that the First Amendment issues relate to all of the counts, and that's what the UK lawyers argued on behalf of Julian this morning. The United States government argued to the contrary, that at most these issues only relate to three of the counts. The court squarely rejected that proposition and is going to hear the appeal with respect to all of the charges.
So they're going to hear in relation to all of them?
That is my understanding. The U.S. tried to confine it to just three of the Espionage Act counts, and at least from what the justices said today in court, they rejected that argument and are going to hear the appeal on all of the charges.
Yes, Bill Goodwin from Computer Weekly. Can I ask what the process is next? What happens next? And also, one thing I didn't understand was both sides being ordered to go away and collaborate on an order. What was that all about? And could you explain that for me, for us, please?
Well, I think on Friday, the 24th, which is the parties are going to have communicated to the court their availabilities and so on. And from there, we can expect a hearing to be listed sometime in the future.
What was the court order that they're supposed to agree to?
Just the availabilities and the next steps and so on, the timings.
Pen Norway, wouldn't it be logical that he is now immediately released in waiting for the next round of appeal?
Well, I would assume it is a logical yes. Now he's been granted appeal, and under all normal circumstances, he should be allowed out on bail if that's with the question. But I don't know where the lawyers are with that request.
Could you step up to the mic so you can answer any questions, please?
Hi, Ben with the Guardian. One for Stella. Stella, I think you mentioned earlier that Joe Biden was running out of time to do the right thing. Could you expand on that? Is that a reference to the impending U.S. presidential election? Is that a sort of an implicit fear that Donald Trump would do something different?
Well, I think it's undeniable. Everyone in this room understands that the political configuration in the United States will, basically determines Julian's freedom or imprisonment. And we don't know what will happen. We know that this administration has had a different, let's say that during the Trump administration there was much more enthusiasm, including in the way that that administration talked about this prosecution. And so as time has gone by, Julian has been in prison for over 5 years now as this extradition process has progressed. And the right thing to do from the Biden administration would have been to abandon this case from day one. There should have been a review of this case It should have been top priority, and in fact, one of the prosecutors who had been working on this case during the Trump administration, I think it was Terwillinger, or I don't know how you pronounce his name, he went into private practice right at the end of the Trump administration and said, well, I expect the Biden administration will probably review this case and might reach a different conclusion. Well, that should have happened from day one. But better late than never, and I think the decision today should send a signal to the Biden administration to look very carefully at this case, which over 40 U.S. law professors have written to the administration and said that this case is an existential threat to the First Amendment, and that should be taken very seriously. And what is the point in pursuing this at this stage? It is just harm to everyone, especially to Julian and to our family. But the harm is also affects protections and long-standing protections that have been intact for hundreds of years in the United States and that are now at grave risk of being fundamentally undermined. One could argue that this indictment already, just the fact of the indictment, has already very gravely undermined it, but they shouldn't take it any further, and they should just drop it. The only thing that really could somehow go some way to mending the harm that has already been done is to drop the case. Well, we know from the Australian government's pronouncements over the years and more and more intensely over time that they have put their position to the United States that Julian should be freed, and on Valentine's Day this year, they also got the backing of 2/3 of the Australian Parliament. The mandate of the Australian government is very clear, and Julian has enormous support in Australia. And so over time, the Australian government has become more and more forceful and clear that this is what is expected. And of course, Australia is a very close partner to the United States, and I think it's really significant, Australia's support for Julian, because until this administration, until the Albanese administration, the Australian government was basically abandoned Julian and complicit in his persecution, just through their silence and facilitation of what was happening, of what was being done to him. And the shift from the Albanese government has, I think, has a decisive impact in the way and the viability of getting away with it, basically. You know, this is a political case, and the United States should abandon the case, and when Julian's home country is calling for his release, it makes all the difference in a case that is completely political. That being said, Julian's not free. He's not free, and he's been in prison for over 5 years, and the Albanese government has to push harder and secure his release. It's just whatever it takes. He needs to be free. And I think it's clear to everyone in this room and everyone who's been observing this that this has to come to an end. And of course, I'm very grateful to what the Australian government has done to date, but it needs to continue advocating for his release. I think with every development there is, with all the world support there is, the world leaders who have come out in Brazil and Mexico, but also Germany, the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, saying Julian should not be extradited. Every time there is a pronouncement like this, it strengthens Julian's case for freedom, and it strengthens Australia's ability to advocate for him.
Hi, I'm Ian Ellison. I was the editor of the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, but worked very closely with WikiLeaks without stories. And I have two questions, I think mainly for Barry. The first is there a potential that even if Julian isn't extradited, he could be tried in absentia and found guilty in the US? And secondly, if he is tried in absentia and found guilty, or is extradited and found guilty, what does that mean for those who work closely, like Christian, like myself, with Julian, in terms of us being reputationally damaged by the US government saying we abided and worked with a criminal, and secondly, I've written to the US ambassador here in London asking for a reassurance that I wouldn't be arrested for having been an editor of the war logs. What does that mean for journalists?
So under U.S. law, he cannot be tried in absentia. He cannot be tried in the United States unless the UK agrees to extradite him there, and that's why today's decision was so important. Hopefully the UK will not extradite him to the United States. If the United States were ultimately to obtain extradition, and if despite all of the reasons that you've heard why they should just drop the case, they decided that they wanted to proceed, it is a terrifying prospect as far as I'm concerned for journalists, not just in the United States but all over the world. The notion that the United States can prosecute anyone anywhere on the planet who has the temerity to report on U.S. national security issues has a tremendous chilling effect on journalism. And the very fact that this prosecution has been brought and that Julian has spent 5 years in prison for doing his job and informing the world of very important newsworthy information, including the fact that the United States has committed war crimes, that already has a tremendous chilling effect. And so I hope that the U.S. government will walk away from the prosecution. If they don't, I hope the High Court will not extradite him. It's not just for Julian and his family, who obviously are most immediately impacted. It's for journalists all over the world, and for us as citizens who depend on journalists to be informed about what the government is doing purportedly in our name.
One last question, thank you.
Last question by the German media. I would like to understand whether a new Home Secretary could reverse the extradition order, and if you think that that would be likely to happen under a new possible Labour administration.
The question is to whom? Well, I don't even know the answer to that. Well, to be honest, since I don't know the answer, I'm probably the best person to try to answer it. Technically, can the decision to extradite be reversed? I think that is so, but whether it's likely under a new administration, I am not entirely convinced. The possible future Prime Minister of this country had a direct sort of input into the process of this case in his previous life as Director of Public Prosecution. So I don't want to speculate on that, but we are seeing political changes in this country in the next year, in the United States in the next half year. and it is creates uncertainty. And I just want to reiterate what has been said here before and what I've said, that the only solution that is just and logical is to end the case, to drop the case. And the signaling from today to the US is obviously in that direction.
I think just going to call that time now. Thank you all for coming. Hopefully you've got lots of content and your notepads are full. There will be opportunity for some short one-to-one interviews afterwards. So I asked, there's obviously a number of you here, a combination of further commitments in the evening and us not having this room for forever. We asked that you sort of come to me if you'd like to speak with Stella. If you'd like to speak with any of the other members up on stage, please do just approach them directly in a nice, orderly and polite manner if we can. And there might be a possibility we might have to pull some interviews just because of the sheer number, and just ask for your understanding on that. But yeah, thank you all for coming, and just do please approach various members if you'd like to speak to.
Thank you. Thank you.